Hello, folks. Hello. Just a coffee thought I had before we get started. I think that maybe a strong dislike of evil, a good sense of good and evil. I think that might be a requirement to writing good stories. Of course, you gotta also make your bad guys human, so, like all things, it's a balancing act. I'm pretty fed up with evil myself. Let's see. Many of the buildings had been shot up, but few had been burned, and none had been burned down. There were the municipal building, town center, check factory. I'm not sure, maybe I said it was not in the center of the town. Municipal building. Let's see. Municipal buildings were toward the town center, including public well and a public gas pump. The islanders probably had two or three cars, motor vehicles at most. I kind of like the term motor vehicles, don't you? There are just some phrases in English that just sound so appealing. I'm sure there's words like that in other languages. Let's see. What language they say? If English is the language of business, I think they said that French is the language of diplomacy. At least it was a few hundred years ago, during Napoleon's time. Of course, his idea of diplomacy was a bit different from most people's. Let's see. From end to end, the town was littered with corpses. Mostly humans, but there were some dead animals as well. Some livestock and dogs. Things like that. A few cats, livestock, dogs, a few cats here and there. The Jade forces on the island had just swept through the place after surrounding it, moving in and pacifying each building. All the occupants had been murdered in a variety of ways, but mostly by shooting. Some people had been tortured, probably near the end, and there were a few left to resist. It was hard to say. The townspeople put up a fight since, let's see, construction varied, with the bigger buildings being brick, and the lighter being, and the smaller being wood. Probably constructed the same way, same as buildings had been on the island for centuries. Let's see, do I need a new paragraph? Being brick, wood, with straw thatched roofs. Thatched, is that the right term? Yeah. Guess I'll have to look that up. Thanks, Word. Let's see, put up a fight since the massacre concealed all that. Any signs of legitimate battle in the way that a great forest fire might cover up sun would cover up a campfire. Assumes a campfire. Let's see. Sick on that. Let's see. Let's see. Gurkha would. Did I call him Gurkha? I should have done more combining of ethnicities in the others in this universe. Like combine Gurkha with French, or French with Tibetans, or Germans with Tibetans, stuff like that. Yeah, if you're going off totally fictional universe, should go all out, right? I should have planned more before I started that story. You know, did a little more prep, you know. I was just gonna go in with the pretty much our world, except for a few differences, and then I decided, like, oh, might as well make everything its own thing. Go all fictional, you know. I mean, it pretty much was from the start. It's just that it was using the real country names for strange countries. Let's see. Gotta hope that some of them went down fighting. They took out any Jade. The Jade had removed their own dead, while leaving everyone else to just rot in the sun on the streets, or in the home places they called home. They left the village, the town, a great cemetery. Goka supposed cemetery was too dignified a term for such a place. In cemeteries, the dead were buried and respected. There was no respect shown here. The people had been dead for some time. The flesh was rotting on their bones. Many of them had turned green or green-brown, or even black. People were bloated, fat with slime, with black ooze underneath their skin. They were being broken down by nature. Animals had carted off many of the dead, but they were now too putrid, even for vultures. If vultures call the island home. I actually don't know if vultures, there's a limit, a threshold for a vulture on what they will or will not eat, at what state a person's dead. They're kind of like nature's garbage disposals. And so, you know, since they evolved to eat rotting things, I assume that they have a pretty high tolerance for it. I don't know if it's true that they'll eat something that's alive if it's just like paralyzed on the spot, you know. I think all animals are smart enough to tell living from dead. Except maybe bugs and bacteria. Of course not bacteria, there's bacteria that eat people alive, like the blob. All that flesh-eating bacteria that people seem to get at random these days. I don't know, like someone cuts their hand on a door in an apartment building, next thing you know, their arm is rotting off their frickin' shoulder. And, you know, nobody can tell me why that happens. Maybe it has something to do with all this antibiotic stuff, you know, making germ-resistant bacteria and whatnot. If you stay in your house, maybe you'll be safe. I don't know. Animals carved up any dead things. The flies had taken their fill of flesh. You know. The flies didn't mind a rotten meal, and they were having their fill now. Many of the flies, after feasting on human flesh, had grown hideously large. But not nearly as large as they could get feeding on flesh. Most of the great flies were about the size of small dogs. They were sickening in appearance, being green, a mix of green, brown, and black, much like the corpses they were feeding on, with bulging red compound eyes. Booker remembered some terrible dream he had, where he was, as a boy, where he was chased by a giant fly with a great evil set of human-like eyes. Let's see, yeah, I'm doing surprisingly well. Doing surprisingly well so far. What I mean is, like, I took a break from the writing for my birthday, and this is me coming back after a day of almost no writing, so maybe this is a sign. Maybe it might be better to take a break occasionally and then come back. Maybe it freshes you up a little bit somehow, I don't know. I don't think that would work for me, usually. The flies were big flies that ate human flesh sometimes became aggressive toward humans, even predatory. Most often, they retained their original personalities. That was the right term. Something with a brain the size of a grain of sand. Goku decided not to risk it. Take out the big flies, Goku ordered. Some of the group got their suppressed pistols out. Telgay, that's... I have a character named Telga, not Telgay. Hopefully that's not too similar a name. It's sometimes smart to have, like, different names, you know. Like you start a name... Whenever you have a named character, just start with a letter of the alphabet you haven't used yet. It's the scope of stories like this that make them difficult to write, you know? It's like, you know, you'll probably have way more than 24 named characters in a story like this. Also, these stories are pretty heavy on events. Like, what would be a climax in most books happens like every chapter in a book like this. So, you know, you have to have stamina. Let's see. Tell Bay the telekinetic showed off her powers against the giant flies. She created several. She picked up some rocks, some baseball-sized rocks with her mind. Perimeter of the town. Let's see. Town devoid of jade. Check. Pass into town. Perimeter of town and flung them at some of the flies with great accuracy. Though big, the giant flies were quite fragile. Well, they when struck by a powerful projectile, they exploded. Explode into green goo, much like a normal fly would if someone stepped on them. Flies are pretty hard to get because they're very fast for some reason. I don't know why they're so fast next to other bugs. I can hit any other bug pretty much instantly, like a moth or something else. I guess it's just their reaction time. If you catch a fly when he's old, like, you know, like 2 or 3 days old and he's near the end of his life, then yeah, they're a lot easier to catch. Let's see, left in the right way. No. Pilbay slew a dozen of these bugs with a dozen rocks and went to get more. Her comrades didn't fire any shots. There. Suppressed pistols. Don't waste your bullets. Precious bullets. Pilbay requested. There. Save them for when we get to the base. Enemy base. Probably, right? Sure. Alright. Ashmaker replied, lowering his pistol. These foul creatures aren't worth their bullets. I feel like they're more worthy of them than the jade. Pilbay reported. I consider these fleshing flies to be worth more than, have more value than the jade. Let's not forget, evil as they are, they're still human. Ashmaker protested. Pilbay blasted a few more big flies out of the air before replying to Ashmaker. At least flies and insects do nature's work. Pilbay replied. No, they get rid of corpses. All kinds of corpses. They fill the earth with life. Their life. You probably couldn't scoop up a handful of dirt on this island without there being some worm or ant or other crawler inside. Probably not. Ashmaker agreed. Goka looked into some of the buildings to see corpses almost completely covered in maggots and buzzing flies. Thankfully, a smaller sort than most. And the smaller, normal size note. Smaller, normal sized ones. He was quite glad he couldn't smell that stench of decomp. He looked to his comrades. All seemed pretty used to the smell, right after they gagged a bit on entering the village. It seemed that humans could get used to anything. Ami, the native girl, seemed very stoic, and at the sight of all the dead natives, Goka thought again, for some reason regarding the girl, made Golka think of Dominique. Lady Dominique would have a terrible time here, Golka noted, the people around him. I think that anyone would have a terrible time here. Where's the cult leader? Let's see. Forest camp. Noted. Everyone except the flies. Dominique possesses the ability to feel terrible incidents that have already happened, Golka said. Noted. It is a psychic ability of hers. Yeah, you could spend all day listing off Dami's powers, and she still gets her butt kicked every now and again. Such things have to happen, you know, to build tension. Can't kill Dami, but, you know, she could end up in peril and trouble and all those other things, you know? It's like, you know, it's like when you have historical people in a story. You can't really kill them unless you're gonna change history, you know? And people know when this... I mean, if you had that, like that Braveheart movie, you knew Braveheart wasn't going to get Longshanks in the end, because Longshanks died. He didn't die in battle, you know? He didn't get killed in action, as they say. Let's see. When it comes to historical figures, I usually make them about 10 or 20% more dramatic than they probably were in reality. You know, it's hard for me to believe that things were not more dramatic than they seemed back in those days. I mean, was everyone really all calm and collected when the Luftwaffe was bombing London? I mean, or when they were at Dunkirk and the whole British Army was going to get taken out? Looks like I'm going to have a note-heavy part here. Let's see. I'm glad I don't have that ability, Helbay replied, though she could do more than her telekinesis at her disposal. She can also touch things and know their history. Golka said. So while we pass through this village and see all this carnage. So while we pass through this village and just see the aftermath, Dami might see the actual slaughter instead. Like a sort of time travel. See all that carnage, and there's nothing you can do about it to make her added. I thought she was able to travel through time. Of course, also noted Such a person could theoretically stop this incident, go back and stop this incident, replace all these rotting bodies and destroyed homes with living people and happy homes. I suppose that's the appeal of the idea of time travel. Golka said, going back and undoing all the tragedies of history, big and small. Just talk makes me nervous, Helbey admitted. What if time travel alters too much about the world? What if it deletes people like me? What if it deletes us from history, replacing us with new people? Replacing us with new people. What if my race, the Koldar, are erased from history because someone went back and kept the Roman Empire from falling? Your people only came to be after Rome? Maker asked. Helbey looked annoyed then. Don't act like that was a recent, like that makes my people young. A young race. Helbey replied. It was 1,000 years ago, after all. 1,000 years is like a grain of sand on the scale of time, Maker said. The Koldar may seem young, be young. 1,000 years ago is when we started calling ourselves smelt. I don't think I ever used the word smelt. I'm just calling ourselves the Koldar. Helbey cleared up. Our ancestors had different names for themselves. It is a very long lineage. Looking at it that way, the Koldar are among Europe's oldest people. Right. Maker agreed. Maker came from Chromia, a pretty old country, right, in his view. He didn't consider the ancient people who lived there and worshipped a fallen meteorite to be his ancestors. But maybe he could trace his kin back that far if he was dedicate his life to it. Such be his ancestors. To him, ancestor and ancestor. The farthest family he ever thought of was his great-great-grandfather, who was apparently a shoemaker. Apparently the Koldar had preferred to look back a bit farther than 100 years ago. Let's see, great-great-grandfather. I guess that's 100 years ago. Could just be hyperbole. Okay, folks, signing off here. It's 30 minutes in. Have a great day. Say stop.